Welcome back, friend. Emotional well-being was never supposed to be about feeling good all of the time. Where did we get that in popular culture? I'm not exactly sure, but here's the truth. Emotional well-being is about feeling everything better, feeling grief better, feeling joy better, feeling frustration better, feeling delight better, feeling all of our emotions, both the ones that are comfortable for us and the ones that are uncomfortable for us better. Better meaning with more skill, with more fluency, and definitely with more connection, more capacity, and more creativity. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the difference between coping with emotions and doing some deeper vertical inner work with our emotional experience. Now, here's the truth. I catch myself doing the opposite of this often. Having a skill set for your inner emotional world doesn't mean that you're not a normal human being who sometimes has a really hard time or even forgets to use the skills and tools that we have available to us. What vibrant emotional health and well-being does look like, though, is starting to notice your emotional patterns. Notice when you've moved away from the skillfulness that you're trying to practice and having the ability to come back to something anchored and grounded within to help you move through the emotional experience. One of the emotional patterns that I fall into over and over again is feeling intense pressure and shame and anxiety when something I've decided to do or try to do doesn't work out in the way that I thought it was going to. Last week, I just had one of those days. I'm sure you have many of those days as well, and your emotional patterns might be different than mine, but I know you're going to hear yourself in my story. The day and the workday started out actually really well. I felt really good about the things I was creating and writing and putting out into the world. I had really strategic mentoring and counseling conversations that I thought went really well. And then I had one tricky conversation that totally threw me for a loop. And the nature of that conversation isn't actually that important. It's just that I had one relationship interaction and it really activated a feeling of fear and disappointment and self-consciousness within me. So take a second and pause. Listen to those feelings words: fear, disappointment, self-consciousness. And here's what's real. As a human being living a big and brave and beautiful life, I will feel those feelings. You will feel those feelings. There's no feelings that we will be immune to as we're living really wholehearted, especially courageous and vulnerable lives. And I know that to be true. And still, when I was feeling those feelings after I got through that tricky conversation, my first thoughts were still, what's wrong with me that I'm feeling this disappointment and this fear and this self-consciousness? I should be more evolved by now. I have all the skills. Why am I feeling this way? My first thoughts were to beat myself up for having those emotions. So really the human thing in that moment is I wanted to feel less. Like I didn't want to feel afraid. I didn't want to feel disappointed. I didn't want to feel self-conscious. A part of my mind was feeling down on myself for feeling those feelings at all. And it took me a second to remind myself, hold your horses, Kara. You're trying to skip to the part of feeling better. You don't want to feel those uncomfortable feelings. You want to feel better right away. And I had to give myself, as I always do, a dose of my own medicine, which is to slow down, get connected, increase my capacity to feel those things, and then to get creative about how I wanted to respond to myself and to the situation at hand. So can you relate when you're feeling something uncomfortable? Does a part of you either try to explain it through your personal failing or judge and blame everybody around you or try to get out of the emotional experience as quickly as possible? If you can answer yes, you are just a human being, you are in good company, stick with me and let's review a different way to go through your emotional experiences. First of all, I want to talk about the difference between coping and growing. And I think our emotions, especially the uncomfortable ones, do require that we do both. I want you to think of coping as like a horizontal line. It keeps you moving through. It keeps you getting through difficult experiences. There is a time and a place for coping. And then I want you to think of growing as like a deeper vertical experience, something that brings you deeper in yourself and vertically helps you to grow and evolve and move beyond the difficult experience. There are so many ways to cope, especially as a midlife mom. And I'm not even going to say all of them are good or bad. They're not all good or all bad. They're serving a purpose, and maybe you can hear yourself in the most common coping that I hear from moms in midlife. We cope with scrolling. We cope with shopping. We cope with a glass of wine at the end of the night. We cope with a glass of tea at the end of the night. We cope with the podcast or the audiobook that kind of fills the silence. We cope with hitting continue on another episode of something we're enjoying and we're watching. We cope with exercise. We cope with satisfying or soul-filling food. We can cope with conversations with friends and just venting and sharing in our experiences. We cope with prayer. We cope with meditation. We cope with soothing and comforting actions. There are moments when coping is exactly the right call. We're not in the time or place to do the deeper vertical work. We just need something to move us through from one day to the next. Being able to cope with demanding emotions or demanding life circumstances is a crucial skill. The question isn't whether or not to cope. The answer is like, yes, we always want to be coping, but it's knowing when coping and continuing to cope is serving you or when it's becoming your whole strategy and it might be holding you back for some deeper learning, deeper growing. And then on the other end of that learning and growing, true well-being and inner freedom. There's a phrase I've been using in some of my writing and teachings and in conversations with my Vibrant Mom mentoring group, and it seems to be really resonating with so many of us. And it's that concept of skimming the surface of our lives. And I think most midlife moms feel that way to some extent. And I think there are different reasons why we feel sometimes that we're skimming through the surface of our lives. And this is one of those reasons when we're having emotional experiences every day, as every human being does. And if we don't take the time to go inward, go vertical a little bit and digest the information from our emotions and complete the stress cycle of that emotion, then we're just coping. And when we do that horizontal line for too long, it feels just kind of like we're skimming the surface. If we don't go deeper on feeling the difficult things better, then we're unintentionally kind of limiting the gratitude, the joy, the good feelings that we're wanting to have as well. So if we're going to grow, that's a vertical movement. It's taking us deeper into ourselves, and it's asking of our actions and our behaviors a forward movement that's not just sustaining, but that is growth producing. So the difference between coping and growing isn't about discipline or being strong or weak or insightful or superficial. It's actually just about being aware. Know which way of being in your emotional world you're choosing in that moment and why. And be sure to do both coping and growing deeper vertical work. You'll find more fulfillment, more well-being, more ease, more joy, and more reward if you have a balanced approach. When you choose growth over coping as a practice, you actually get the 3 C's of the Vibrant Mom framework being built up and increasing and growing over time. And those 3 C's are connection, capacity, and creativity. For true emotional well being, we want to increase or grow all three of those things. And your emotions themselves, even the uncomfortable or painful ones, yes, even my feelings of fear and disappointment and self consciousness are all asking me to grow in my connection with myself, in my capacity to take on challenging, tricky conversations or challenging and tricky growth producing circumstances, and asking me to grow in my creativity in how I respond to myself when I feel those things, and more creativity in the actions I take after feeling those things. You can think of the first C, connection, like a deeper well of love and trust and acceptance and inner respect and care, you within you. You can also think of connection as being connected to the core principles and values that matter most to you and that you try to align yourself with, even when things are challenging or emotionally tense. And you can think of connection as being able to be connected to the people and the relationships that really matter to you and that are here for your growth and your well-being. So you need to be connected to all people, but there might be a few chosen people that we want to maintain a deep connection with. And that deeper connection with others, with what matters most to us and with ourselves deeply on the inside, is a hallmark of emotional maturity, and actually a skill set in and of itself to equip yourself with and grow in more deeply. It's one of the first lessons in the Vibrant Mom Collective Pathway program. I have never met a woman who hasn't been able to grow in that area in her relationship with herself, myself included. Taking a look at that second C, we want to increase our capacity to be with the full range of the human experience and the emotions that we'll have as human beings throughout our lifetime. And more capacity, more space to feel doesn't mean that the difficult emotions affect you less. You will feel everything even as you increase your capacity. It means that those feelings don't push you around in the same ways that they used to as you're in a growing relationship with yourself. Difficult emotions don't flatten you or command you or get you as reactive as you used to be. It means that our difficult life experiences have more room and a place to go. Like, I like to think about widening the canyon walls, thinking about a narrow canyon with a big volume of water pushing through that tiny little crack. That pressure and that splashiness and that dynamism is really overwhelming when we're experiencing emotions in that constricted and tight way. So with increased capacity, you can think about those canyon walls widening and that volume of water having a container, having a space to move through, be listened to with a generous pause and curiosity, less tension, less reactivity, less impulsiveness, less judgment, and less shutdown around our difficult emotional experiences. That is the reward of increased capacity. And then the final C of the Vibrant Mom framework, what we're looking for as we're building skillfulness and increasing our emotional well-being, is creativity. Creativity in our response, the way we're narrating our experience and telling ourselves a story on the inside, and more creativity in the way that we're showing up with other people, interacting and conversing in our relationships, and more creativity in the spacious and authentic and joy-filled and meaningful lives that we're trying to live. And what I have also seen, which delights me and often surprises the women that I work with, is that as we're getting more connected, more capable, and more creative in our inner emotional world, another form of creativity starts to manifest. And that is a creative expression of your essential self and the unique perspectives and gifts and offerings you can make in your own life or in the lives of other people. And as you tap into your inner creativity, more joy and more purpose manifests. This is like a self-fulfilling cycle. The more we allow ourselves to feel all the things, not just move to feel better quickly, but feel all the things better through connection and capacity and creativity, then we start to free up more space in our minds and our hearts. We're able to enjoy our lives. We're able to bring more joy into our life. We're able to experience more fulfillment, and we're able to kind of step into our creative expression, whatever that looks like in the season of life that we're in. It's one of the things I'm really excited about talking about more on this podcast is the identity evolution that is here for us as midlife mothers and how to step braver and fuller into our creative self-expression. So here is my invitation for you and a reminder. Emotional well-being is not about feeling good all the time. Like no matter how mature you get, how much you grow, how empowered you are, how well counseled or coached you are, the goal isn't to cut out the difficult feelings like self-consciousness or disappointment or fear. It's being able to feel all of it better with more of yourself available. This is the work, and this is what becomes possible. If you've been listening all month long, we are still in the month of May. At the time that this podcast episode drops, the Vibrant Mom Collective is on sale, 25% off. It's my Mother's Day gift, the Mother's Day month. My guess is some of you are feeling the pull and feeling ready, even if you're a little intimidated by the timeline or the cost or this kind of uncertainty that comes at the other side of something new. But there is a seat in a cohort with your name on it. If you are filling the poll, I can't wait to see you on the inside. And also, drop me a link either on Instagram in my DMs or on the show notes of this podcast episode. Let me know which of the 3 C's are resonating with you most. Which one are you most interested in gaining skillfulness? Each one in and of itself is its own skill set. And I can't wait to hear what you're learning and curious about as we walk this path together. As always, thank you so much for listening all the way to the end with me. I can't wait to connect again next week.